That is, Dan. That is one of the things that keeps me awake at night. I know. I know for the listeners, those that listen regularly know that I worry about that sort of thing. One of my greatest fears is that Iran or North Korea or another country that doesn't like us, that has missile capability, throws a nuclear bomb up into orbit and sets it off above the central United States and knocks out virtually all of our infrastructure in one fell swoop. Mm-hmm. Your nuclear bomb going off and irradiating the oil is essentially very, very similar. It would grind the economy to a halt. Food deliveries would not be able to be made. It would set us back probably, I would say, maybe 20 years in our infrastructure, if not more, and many, many people would die.
Yeah, you indicated that you have been reading book one, and if we could talk a little bit about book one, because it's so pertinent to what you're talking about. What I try to do in book one is to try and help the American people begin to understand why the Muslims, especially the radical Muslims, hate us so much. And in the beginning of the book, when you first meet the five terrorists, what you find out, as you pointed out earlier in your discussion, is that these terrorists are not your father's terrorists. They don't ride camels. They don't have beards. They don't wear funny cloths on their heads. They don't live in caves, and they don't eat camel jerky, and they don't shoot their guns in the air. In fact, they don't even own guns. They were all educated in Western universities, most of them in the United States. And so we have a situation where, as we get to understand the culture and the life of these five terrorists, we begin to hopefully understand who these people are and why they feel the way they do about us as the United States. It's intriguing, and I'm not going to spoil it for your audience, because I obviously want them to read the book. But the makeup of the five members is quite. It's one of the first twists in the book, and it's in the very first few pages. But their leader, Mohammed El-Sargon, says to them at the very first meeting, "I want you to bring your expertise and look at every attack that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda has brought against the United States, whether it was inside the United States or outside the United States." And then he asks them this question: "Tell me and tell your brothers, what did they do wrong?" And then there's a whole discussion about all the events that took place and why did they do wrong. And then he tells them that we have two old Soviet Union suitcase dirty bombs, and we have a strategic alliance with the Iranian nuclear program to rebuild these into functioning nuclear weapons of mass destruction. And then he charges each of these specialists with this charge. How would you use them against the United States? Where would you use them? To what outcome? And the book then evolves into four different scenarios. How these people think and the things that they've chosen. Now, I can tell you that people who have read this book say the scenarios are scary real. They're all plausible. They're all possible. And people find it very difficult to put this book down once they start it. I did an interview a week ago this past Monday with a gentleman who said he had read the book, and he told the audience, "I've read the book all the way through, and I have to tell you, I couldn't put the damn thing down, and it just scared the hell out of me." That's really a good thing, because that's what I'm trying to do as a writer, to entertain my audience. I will tell you that in book one, there are two emotions about the ending of the book, and that is people either love it or hate it. But I will tell you that the people who've told me that they hate it immediately ask me, when can I see book two? And so what's interesting to me is that there's what a local newspaper did an interview of me, and they said the title of the article was "The Story Behind the Story." And the story behind the story is how I came to become a writer. At 67 years of age, I had been in the money management business for 40 years. I still continue to manage money. And on Sanibel Island, there's a place called the Big Arts Center. And they provide enrichment classes for the residents of the island. And I saw, for the 2012 winter season, a 4-session course on Introduction to Writing Mysteries and Thrillers. And I'd taken clay and glass and watercolors and all kinds of things. So I decided I would try this course. And I walked in the first day of the class, which was February the 6th, 2012. I went home, and I sat down at my computer, and I wrote 1,000 words. I wrote the title of the book and the main story, and I could see in my mind how the book ended. So I went in the following week, and I showed the instructor what I had done, and she'd written 12 novels. And I told her that I could see how the book ended, and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I can see the last line in the last paragraph on the last page." She said, "For somebody who's never had an experience, that's not really normal." What I didn't tell her was I knew how book 2 started and ended, and book 3 started and ended, and I hadn't written a word in those. I went home, and I wrote book 1, 400 pages, in 90 days. The second installment of the trilogy is about 480 pages, and I wrote that in 90 days. And the third installment is about 450 pages, and I wrote that in 90 days. So from February the 6th of 2012, with the first keystroke on the computer board, to September the 6th, 2013, 18 months, I wrote a trilogy, 3 books, 3 novels in 18 months, going from never written anything in my life. What you don't know, however, is that in the last 30 days, I signed a contract to make a movie out of book 1.
Oh, excellent. You know, I was reading the book, and I'm thinking to myself that this kind of reads like, a friend of mine said, this reads like a script. And I said,
many director tells me it reads like a screenplay the way it's written.
Yeah, and it's like some of the chapters are only like 2 paragraphs long.
Right. It's the chapters average between 650 and 1,250 words.
Yeah, and it's great. I like books that are like that because, frankly,
keeps you engaged.
It not only keeps you engaged, it keeps your imagination active. That is the type of book that I look for. I read a lot of Larry Niven novels. He's a science fiction writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I also read, Kuntz, and I used to read Stephen King a long time ago, and I like those books. But King, he just drags you into the weeds of the minutia and describes the threads in somebody's tie. I really don't care about the threads in somebody's tie. If your writer wants to say he's wearing a red tie, fine. I don't care. I want to know what's going on. And
I had a gentleman tell me in an interview, he said, "I read your book, and I like the short chapters." He said, you write with enough detail to keep me interested, but as you just said, you don't put me in the weeds trying to figure out all the stuff. And he said to me, that really shocked me, but all of a sudden, I've had like 6 or 7 different people say the same thing. It really reminds me of early Tom Clancy. If you read The Hunt for Red October, same kind of style, short chapters, a lot of pace, a lot of cliffhangers, which I'm just shocked at that people would think of me in the same category. And he said, you got to think, with Lee Child and Tom Clancy gone now, who's going to pick up the mantle? Who's going to fill the space? And maybe you're supposed to fill the space. And I said, well, those are pretty big shoes to fill. But I do find people that tell me that they can't, as they read the book, they can't figure out whether they're watching a big screen, like in a movie theater, or watching a television screen watching the news. It's very hard to distinguish between fiction and reality. And on the front cover of the book, you'll notice that it says, this book is as current as today's headlines, but scarier than tomorrow's. And I had a producer who read the book who told me that we were talking to, and he said, I consider myself to be a real, a pretty good amateur sleuth. I've read thousands and thousands of scripts and books, and he said, I can't figure out where your cliffhangers are going. And I got so frustrated that he said, I just decided to hell with it. I'm just going to see what he does and sit back and enjoy it. So this book is, there was there's an article on the website from a paper that did a review of the book, and towards the end of the interview or the review, the reporter said the thriller space is getting tired, and with Clancy gone and Childs gone, Patterson no longer really writing his own books, and other people not really writing their books any longer. This space really needs a fresh face, and she said maybe Mr. Perkins is that fresh face we've been looking for. And I'm saying at 67 years old, I'm a fresh face.
That's at 67, you've got a lifetime of experience, and you know the story that you want to tell, and that is excellent. That is, I like the writing style.
Thank you.
I really do. I'll tell the potential readers this, and folks, this would make an excellent Christmas gift for somebody. You can get it at Amazon.com. You can get it at Dan's website. Let me give you the address here if I can stumble through this. It's called Dan Perkins at Sanibel.com. It's spelled just like the island in Florida, Sanibel Island. Dan Perkins at Sanibel.com.
Right, and remind your listeners that it's not the at signal. It is the preposition, the word at.
Yes, you just did that. That takes a little bit of load off of me. That's great. I like that. That's excellent.
So that's book one. Book two is The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, America Rebuilds. And that's the story of, and again, a very unusual situation. Book two starts 12 hours before the end of book one, so that a person who hasn't read book one can pick up book two, and they can see what's going on and get involved. And so the challenge in book two is for the government and for the principal players is how do we deal with this devastation. And I've had people tell me that they take a breath on the first page and they feel like they don't take another breath for page 100. It's very fast-paced. There's chaos everywhere. All kinds of things are going on. And we're testing the ability of our government to function in a time of the worst national crisis we've ever experienced. And if book one is a psychological thriller, there's also in book two a psychological impact, but also the devastation that's illustrated becomes very real. And again, big screen, small screen, and so it's also engaging, full of cliffhangers, same style, 650 to 1,250 words in a chapter. And it begins to deal with something that you and I talked about before we went on the air, and how do we as a country respond? And I was mentioning to you on September 11th every year in New York City, we have a memorial service for the people who died in the World Trade Center attack. And the day after that this year, the head of Al-Qaeda made a speech in which he said, and you can get it on the internet, he said, America needs to bleed. If we can make America unstable to the point that they will continue to shift more and more resources away from the economy to the security, we can slow down the American economy. And we'll put people out of work, and the unemployment rate will continue to rise. And we need I'm just paraphrasing him, he's saying, what we need in America are what are called lone wolf attacks. And these are attacks by one or two people in a particular situation to create fear and disrupt